today. Again, as people come in, they'll be able to join in. But again, the folks that are here, thank you all. Welcome to our webinar on GIS and Cemeteries, Digital Transformation for Cemeteries, DIY, Do-It-Yourself Paper Record Conversion. A little bit different of a format today. I'm going to talk a little more and present a little more along with Aaron. Today, it's going to be more on the kind of the hands-on, not so much of the technical side, but more geared a little more towards folks that maybe don't have much experience with GIS or with really any sort of cemetery management software. But we're going to start out here with just the paper record conversion, which is the first step in this whole process. So again, thank you for attending. Like I said, my name is Bill Steele. I'm business development specialist and take care of marketing here at CloudPoint. Erin Strickler, one of our professional engineers on staff. She leads our cemetery team, heads up our projects that we do for cemeteries. She's also director of data services here. I do want to quickly just remind you guys, we have webinars scheduled out throughout the rest of the year on a lot of various topics. So if anything of interest to you or pertaining to your organization, make sure and check those out, sign up. A couple weeks here, we've got GIS and 911 system. That's a big thing. A lot of states are implementing. So we'll be talking about topology specifically in that one. We have a 3-part series on indoor mapping. So part 1 of 3, that's on March 24th, how points of interest can enhance your indoor maps. We recently, last year, got our ArcGIS indoor specialty through Esri. So kind of a newer thing there that we're really trying to promote and talk to people about. And then April 7th, exploring upgrades to our sign inventory management system. So again, if any of you guys have to deal with signage, that can be a big task. Obviously, there's a lot of signs out there that folks might need to manage with your organization. So that's going to be talking about Sign-Ops, our sign inventory management system that we have that folks can make use of. So you can sign up for those. Again, those are just a couple upcoming webinars, but you can find all those at cloudpointgeo.com/webinars. Sign up for one or all of them. And just to remind you guys, we use Zoom for all our webinars. So you can see here now, obviously, as you're sitting in Zoom, we have the Q&A. Feel free to drop any questions that you have for us throughout the webinar. We'll be happy to try to get to as many of those as possible. Also, the chat box, I'll probably send some links and some information in the chat box as we go along, but feel free to leave us a message or put a question in there as well. And just to kind of cover real quick, our company, we cover a lot of areas. Obviously, I mentioned a few there upcoming with the webinars, be it with our specialties, with the release ready and what we can do with enterprise, and even leveraging Amazon Web Services for that, all to our indoor mapping, our cemetery mapping services, obviously, but also just our AGO, ArcGIS Online capabilities, and all of our work for local governments, from asset management, whether it's pure data collection or working within your GIS system. Their sign-ups with the sign management, parcels obviously is a big one with land records, parcel fabric, and then also working with GIS for NG 911 services. So a lot of different areas that we specialize in. So go ahead and make sure and hit up our website and dive more into those. And again, webinars are a good way to learn a little bit more of that as well. So let's dive in. I'm going to go ahead and open this here. Sorry, I just need to open one more thing. So digital transformation for cemeteries, DIY, do-it-yourself paper record conversion. I want to start out with a couple poll questions here. Let's get going, launch poll. So we've got 2 questions there. If you guys could go ahead and submit your answer to that. Question 1, about how many records total do you have to convert? Less than 5,000, 5 to 10,000. 10 to 50,000 or more than 50,000. Question 2, are you currently using any software to maintain any of your records? So that would be, either no or yes, a simple database like Excel, or complex like a software program or SQL. Go ahead and give it a minute here. A couple votes coming in. Give you guys a few more seconds to answer. All right, and everything looks pretty split. So it looks like a couple of you guys have a little smaller cemeteries, less than 5,000, but we've got some larger ones as well. And we do have some, looks like most Excel users. That's good. That's good that you guys have started. Either, you might still have things on paper, that's fine. But obviously, at least starting that process, getting them digital, even just something as basic as an Excel spreadsheet is great. I'll give you guys a little background myself. Personally, I did, prior to coming to CloudPoint, I did work in a cemetery as a counselor, sales counselor, also helped manage some. It was a larger cemetery. We had about 50 acres or so developed, 25,000 interments. We were at the time, this was a couple years back at the time, we were doing about 200 interments a year, so fairly busy. So paper pains, I'd like to point out there that yes, we had some digital, but a lot of it was still paper records. So folks would come in, you're trying to handle one family, whether you're finding a grave or selling a space maybe, or setting up arrangements for an interment, and another family walks in and trying to do the best you can, juggling papers and cards and binders and books. And then, of course, once you get out onto the grounds, well, now all of a sudden you're, trying to carry around all that information as well, maps and paper maps and binders and whatnot. So going digital, having some records digital was helpful. And I can definitely attest that it was better to have all of them digital. We were probably only about a fifth of our records had been converted at that time. So definitely a better way than the paper records. And so then a little background on our company with regards to cemetery mapping. As of right now, we have completed or working on, we've completed 12 cemeteries, working on another, in talks with other cemeteries, obviously, trying to work with them to figure out how we can help them complete these projects as well. But anywhere from townships, cities, county, even private cemeteries. So this is, we understand, obviously, every cemetery is unique in what they need and what they have. But we're able to work with whoever needs the help. And again, the cemeteries that we have worked with, some have been paper only, and we've had to convert that over, whether they did the work themselves or we helped them with that. And but some of the cemeteries we work with, they already started from having their records digital, and it was much easier moving forward from there. So that really is kind of that first step. And so obviously the big question is why. It sounds great, but why? Quick and easy to search. Family walks in, or a family inquires where a loved one's interred. Very easy to find that information, point them right to it, especially when those digital records are hooked up to a map. And that's something that we'll talk about in later webinars. Easy to back up. So that the next three kind of go hand in hand. Easy to back up, so it keeps it safe from theft or fire, keeps it secure. So only the people that need access have access. It's safe from aging. Obviously, paper records. I'm sure all of you folks, if you've worked much in the cemetery, you've seen those falling apart index cards or bound books, ledgers of interments and sales records and whatnot. So it's just a better, easier way. You can have it in multiple spots. You can access it in multiple points. So that's really kind of the highlights as to the why that we want to convert to digital. And so where do we start? We highly recommend, this is an example, and Aaron's going to go over this more, but this is an example of a spreadsheet that we've actually worked up for clients that they can leverage. But the starting is us recommending even something as simple as an Excel sheet. So I'm going to hand controls over to Aaron, and Erin, go ahead. She's going to step in and she's going to give us a little background on GIS and how that works, and then how we can put it all together.
I had to give up remote control to unmute myself, so I will ask for that again. Thanks, Bill. I'm glad to see that most of you are using Excel. So I may spend a little bit more time on the whys behind these best practices and less time actually in Excel, but we'll just see how it goes. If you have any questions at any point along the way, just shoot those in the chat box and Bill will get those to me. I did want to start with a really quick introduction to GIS. What I'm going to talk about today will apply no matter what system you decide to move forward with, whether it's a software system where you don't ever see the GIS, or if you just want to stay in Excel. So, but this is what we do every day. We think it's really useful in lots of situations, and cemeteries is one of those. So I did want to take a little bit of time to briefly explain what that is. So this, what you see on the screen is sort of a GIS, just a description of GIS, a visual description. Down here, you've got what would be the real world, and then floating above are representations of different types of data. So it could be parcels. This one up here kind of looks like it might be parcels. In cemeteries cases, that would be your graves or your lots. This might be a road center line, and these might be address points. Just in general, how those layers work. Each layer depicts one portion of reality, and then we stack those layers on top of each other to get a good picture of what's actually happening. So how does that apply to cemeteries? So we like to start with aerial imagery when we have new projects. It gives you a good basis. A lot of times people don't have great to-scale maps, and aerial imagery where you can see the headstones is a really useful place to start. And then on top of that, we would layer whatever your subdivisions are, graves, lots, rows, doesn't matter, we'd have a layer for each. And then anything else tied to the ground we can map. Roads, pathways, utilities. If you have benches you want to map, those can be added too. And this is really what we're doing today. Each of those layers has a table tied to it, a database. So what we want to do is give you a way to get a head start on that. You know your data the best. You can yourself start populating this data in a way that then can be used in a system later on. So what we're talking about today is getting a head start on this portion. To the right of this green line is what our clients typically see. If we set up the GIS, they would interact with that through maybe some public applications or some private applications where they can make those edits. Wouldn't necessarily ever know the GIS is behind it, but they would interact with those. So for today, I'm going to use just a very simple example of these 8 graves. This is the mapping side, and then this is obviously the database side. So I've got these 8 graves. I'm going to call them, I'm going to call the section 7 lot A, and we've numbered them 1 through 8. Whatever your current system is great. So our best practice number 1 is to create unique IDs. You probably are already doing that in some sense. The important thing to remember is that as you're looking at your whole cemetery as a whole, that every grave needs its own unique ID. So you might know that the east side is, you know, you got 1 through 8 on the east side. You also have 1 through 8 on the west side. We need to make sure that that's spelled out clearly in those unique IDs. So what that might look like in Excel is to have a column for each of those divisions. I put section, lot, grave, doesn't matter what yours are. You can have as many or as few as you want, as long as in the end those graves are unique. Those IDs are unique. And then we would put those together. So with Excel and the sheet that we will share with you and show you today, we have these calculating automatically. That way, you don't have to remember which order they go in. You just have to know, all right, I'm in section 7, lot A, and then this grave. We would also recommend that when you put this grave ID together, that you go from the largest subdivision to the smallest. So start with section, lot, grave. If row fits in there somewhere, figure out where that makes sense to do that. So next, it's important to be consistent. So say this section's name is actually Petunia. If you have different people doing different different entry, or maybe even your physical records have different names for this section, it might look like this. Sometimes we use petunia, sometimes we use PET, sometimes we use P. And as humans, we can figure out, we know what that means. We know these all mean the same thing, but as we're trying to tie each row of this database to a grave in the map, you want to make sure there's a one-to-one connection and that they are consistent. So that is one place where you want to make sure you're consistent. Another one would be the dates. It's really easy just to whatever you feel like that day, putting in that type of date format, but you want to be consistent so that you can search and you can sort, because we want to use the functions in Excel while that is the way we're maintaining our data. And the other thing would be, say John bought lots 1 through 4. Is tempting to say, I'm just going to throw 1 through 4 in that same line. But what that does is it's harder to untangle if he sells lots 3 through 4. So having one row, which is another best practice, one row per record is the way you want to go. So if I cleaned this up so that things are consistent, that's what it would look like. Also, want to point out, if all you know is someone died or bought this in July of 1960, you'll want to throw a 1 in there maybe for the first, just so that you can keep that consistency. If all you have is a year of 1960, you probably want to just throw 1960 in there again so that it fits the format. So kind of alluded to this already. You want to keep separate, this one's different, keep separate tables per record type. So you know that your sales cards and your burial cards have different information on them because you need different information for those. So what we want to do is keep those in separate tables to make that simple. You'll know right where to go when you want a sales record, or right where to go when you want a burial record. So we would just pull those apart, and then we could keep different information. You could, if you had a very simple cemetery where you have one owner and one burial per grave, you could have one line for each grave. But we all know that that's not how it works. There's always more sales or more burials, and it gets more complicated. So to eliminate that complication, we pull those apart and have 2 different tables. And with that too, give each record its own row. So this is where if John owns all 4 of these, if he sells 3 to his son, then it's really easy to just keep that updated. You don't have to go figure out which ones we want to keep in which row. You just have 1 for each. And then this leads to this John Jr. here. Where should that junior go? Does that go in the last name or the first name? And so our last best practice is to separate your data as much as possible. In GIS speak, it's called parsing your data. So instead of having, just a first and a last name, we want to pull that data out as much as we can. So last, first, middle, maiden, suffix. Then when someone's entering data, there's no question about where it goes. If the software you end up going with wants to combine those, that's easy to combine. It is much harder to pull that data apart if you need to. So keeping it separate from the beginning is the way to go. And whoops. So does anybody have any questions on those best practices before we dive into the Excel?
I don't see anything.
Okay.
But nothing here. Let me go ahead and pull the sheet over. Okay, there we go.
Thanks. So this is the Excel sheet we've developed to help make those best practices as simple as possible. You can obviously take what we have said and make your own. We will share this with you after the webinar. Bill will send you an email. And so I won't read all this, but this is sort of our brief introduction, instructions, how to get a hold of us if you have any questions. And like I said, we keep those records separate. we show two because most cemeteries have burials and sales. You might want to keep another set of records for something else, and that is fine. We're not limiting you to these two, but these are the most common that we see. So as we get into this burial tab, I just kind of want to talk about the divisions we have. So this is that unique ID, the location field. And again, that's really important as you want to tie that to a map to make sure there's a one-to-one or one-to-many. You can have many records to one grave relationship that will match, and you won't have any orphaned records that don't have a place to go. We have deceased name, and again, those are parsed out. Date of birth, and we have that locked down. I'll enter some data in and you can see how we're trying to force consistency there. And all of these are optional. Whatever data you have, throw it in there. You can delete fields as you need to if you don't keep some of this information, or you can add fields if you want. But so we have date of death, and age will calculate if the dates are after 1899. I don't know if you've messed with dates in Excel, but it does not recognize dates before 1899 because of the way it starts 1/1/1900 as 0. So it just doesn't understand negative dates. But as long as your dates are after that, that'll automatically calculate the age. We have a drop down to show, what type of burial that is. We've got 4 listed here, but you could add to that list too. And maybe some other information about the burial. So I am going to, I think we'll just throw some in to show you guys how that works. We just have generic labels because we don't know what you call your graves or your divisions. So I've got division 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to go with, again, starting largest to smallest. I'm going to go section, lot, grave. So feel free, there's 5 here, but you do not have to use them all. And you'll see as I enter data, it will build that grave ID. And again, we're just trying to eliminate as many errors as we can so that that is always built the same way. And then I'm going to enter some data here. I found some famous people on Find a Grave yesterday, and so that's who we're going to enter in.
I wondered where you're going with that.
It was too hard to just make up information. So then you can see as I hover over this, we've forced the month to be a number between 1 and 12, and the date to be a number between 1 and 31. And that way there's just no question about what you're supposed to put in there. I'm going to do one more so you can see the, oops. Yeah. So you can see that age will calculate. Just something you don't necessarily need, but it's nice to have there for you. And then any of this information obviously is optional. I'm going to do one more that is before 18. Actually, I'm going to move to the sales because we're running out of time. So the sales is very similar. You would have the same divisions. We have sections for 2 owner names because we know typically, or a lot of times, a husband and wife purchase together, and we wanted to have one spot for those 2 names to go together. Purchase date, if you have it, and then any information you might want to know about your owner. Again, that's why we have 2 separate tables, so we can keep 2 different sets of information. So Bill, if you want to pull in the completed Excel sheet, I will show you then how you could stop here and just use this. So thank you. We have a bunch of information pulled in, and I'm actually already sorted. So I'm gonna hide this, but this is where just Bill said, being able to search quickly comes in handy. So if somebody comes in and they know their relative's last name is, I'm going to go with Smith just because I know that it's there. Then you can filter by Smiths, and now you've got all the Smiths in the cemetery. If you instead wanted to see, turn those all back on, all the graves in section 1, then you can do that. I don't have very many. And you can also sort by number. Again, why it makes sense to go largest to smallest, because you can decide which one you want to sort by. And I think, so sales is the same way. Let's do sorting over here. Oops. And these are all just functions built in Excel that you guys can take advantage of, those of you that are already using Excel. So if Bill, any questions?
Nope, I don't think so. I'm going to stop your remote control. There we go. Take my computer back over here. Let me double check. I don't have anything in the Q&A or chat. So guys, I'm going to go ahead and jump to our contact page. There we go. So yes. So just like Aaron said, the biggest takeaway for this is that highly customizable, right? So we get our paper records off of paper into a digital format. One, it makes it easier for you folks and even your families potentially to find that information, find a loved one. But also for you to keep track of that information makes access a little easier. But then it also prepares you to take that next step, which is converting it to a GIS map of some sort. And again, highly customizable. That's kind of point number 2. So 1, it keeps your records safer. 2, it's going to be highly customizable. We've had folks that we've had cemeteries we've worked with that they want to have pictures of every headstone attached to the grave, documentation. We can scan in documents, whether it's a sales authorization, a contract, a sales receipt, interment authorization, things like that. Those can be scanned in and added to that data as well.
Can I interrupt for just a second, Bill? Yeah. I was going to say, hey, I forgot to say, also as you're saving those records, if you scan them to PDF, if you can save them with the grave ID, then that makes it super easy to connect those later in the future. So just wanted to, one of those other ways we're being consistent is really helpful.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt.
Nope, not a problem. Thank you for that. So again, keeping your records safer in a better way, easier to access. But then also, again, setting you up for that next step, setting you up for that mapping service that we're able to provide as well. Or anybody, to be perfectly honest. This is something to where once your records are converted, getting them into a digital format, whether it's Excel or something else, once they're into that digital format, it just makes it that much easier for anybody to really come in and help you kind of take that next step and go into that mapping service. So thank you all so much for attending today. Again, a little bit different format, so thank you for bearing with us as we tried some new things out here, but we hope that you guys all got something out of it. I will be following up with everyone that attended, everyone that registered even. I'll be following up with an email. I'm going to go ahead and send you guys a copy of that spreadsheet so you have something to go off of, whether you use it or not. But I'm going to send you a copy of that. And we do record all of our webinars, so I will be sending out a recording for this as well. But please feel free to contact us. We got our office number on there, 877-377-8124, both of our emails as well. And of course, we're all over social media, and you can just get a hold of us directly, cloudpointgeo.com/contact. I'm going to go ahead and leave this up for a minute. But again, thank you all so much for attending, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you.